Let's start with the Roger Scruton affair, because it's something that's quite recent. It's something you've written about, you were heavily involved in fact. For anyone who didn't follow it, just tell us what happened.
Oh yeah, the long and short of it is that the very distinguished British philosopher Roger Scruton, now in his mid-70s, author of more than 40 books on a range of subjects, aesthetics, philosophy, architecture, music, gave an interview to a magazine in the UK called The New Statesman, and the deputy editor of The New Statesman, one George Eaton, misrepresented what had been said in the interview, lied about what had been said in the interview, and caused Roger Scruton to be fired within 5 hours from the position he held, a non-stipendiary, an unpaid position, advising a British government quango. And this may seem all like, well, I suppose a lot of people who are not familiar with Scruton or government quangos may think, well, so what? So what is that I hold this very old-fashioned view, which is that you shouldn't be allowed to just lie about people and get away with it. And this was one of the most blatant, flagrant examples of somebody doing that. In journalism, it can happen in other fields, trades as well, but one of the most flagrant examples I've seen in my life in journalism of somebody doing that. And I knew from the moment I read the alleged quotes that they were untrue, because I've been fortunate enough to know Roger Scruton for almost 20 years now. And I know that he doesn't think that the Chinese are a people made up of weird robot automatons or something. I knew that it was wrong, that this hack had said this. I looked into it. Sure enough, Roger Scruton hadn't said that. He'd said that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to make the Chinese people into automatons. That's just a lie. And we are all, I think, sadly, for all sorts of political and other reasons, becoming used to a low standard of truth in public as in private life. But sometimes that comes right up to your door and you just got to stop it. So I have worked quite hard over recent weeks to expose this scandal and to try to reverse it. And although Roger Scruton remains sacked from that government role, it's now known and recognized widely that the New Statesman's deputy editor, George Eaton, lied, misrepresented the contents of the interview, and that this was dishonest journalism at its worst. And so yes, we turned it around a bit.
And one of the things in this affair that struck me particularly was that I think the journalist in question had tweeted or put something on his Instagram, which was a picture of himself swigging champagne for having achieved the firing of somebody by lying about them. Yeah,
that's a particularly ugly thing to do after getting somebody fired from their job. George Eaton had posted this photograph on Instagram, subsequently removed it, but of him swigging champagne, saying the feeling you get when you get racist and homophobe Roger Scruton fired from his government position. By the way, the homophobe claim was particularly interesting because the tape of the interview, which I subsequently acquired, showed that George Eaton himself said something which by his own lights would be homophobic. The question he put to Roger Scruton was, you've been criticized in the past for saying that homosexuality is not normal, but that's just a statement of the obvious. That's what George Eaton says. Roger Scruton then says, oh, well, no, when I say not normal, I mean it's not the norm in the same way that having ginger hair isn't the norm. So this journalist says something that is homophobic and then attributes the homophobia to the person who didn't say something homophobic, who's the target of his smear campaign. So it's a really interesting lesson. I think this happens sometimes in journalism. There are times when you can just see how the whole wretched hit job is done. And that's what I wanted to do. That's why I wrote a big cover piece in The Spectator a few weeks ago now called The Anatomy of a Hit Job. Because, I'm fortunate enough in this position because I knew the person who the accusations were being made about. But I mean, I've been overwhelmed by messages since, as you can imagine, by more people than usual saying, look what's happened to me, and this has been said about me, and so on. And so, in a way, I think it's resonated with a slightly wider number of people than would normally be the case, because I think we've all been becoming familiar in recent years with the fact that the media is not honest with very basic things. I'm not saying all the media, I'm not saying all journalists, there are some fine journalists. But as the model of funding in journalism dies, or at least stumbles very severely, it's sort of hollowed out. And I say this as a journalist myself, it's being hollowed out. And in the space of reporting and having to really stick very carefully to facts, there's been this melding. Something's been happening whereby an activist like this guy, George Eaton, can go in to try to take out an interview subject. And the aim of the interview is therefore not an interview. It's to do something else. And I think that a lot of people have noticed in recent years a tendency in television and in print journalism to move from doing the thing that you hold yourself out as doing and to do something else. And once you work out what that something else is, it's very, apart from anything else, it's a scales from eyes moment, because after that people don't trust the media again.